This is one of a number of classes on the topic of core competency. Let's start by looking at the prescriptive strategy process. So here we start with the mission and goals of the organization. And we look at these in the context of the external environment. What are the opportunities and threats posed by the external environment? What opportunities are there out there to expand the business, to expand the market, to innovate? What opportunities are there in the wider economy? And also, what are the threats? What's the threat of new competition or of international competition? What's the threat from the redundancy of existing capital because of rapid technological change? So we have to look at the external environment to try and figure out what is the best mission, what is the best direction for the business, to see what's happening externally. Needless to say, we also have an internal situation we need to account for, and that may be summarized in terms of the strengths and the weaknesses of the organization. What are the strengths of the organization? Perhaps addressed with the workers and with the management. Perhaps they are a strong management, capable of implementing change and capable of keeping the product contemporary and keeping the product up to customers' expectations and satisfying the customer in their expectations. Also, what are the weaknesses of the business? Perhaps some of the capital equipment is getting on a bit. It's getting old and needs replacing, or perhaps the research and development department haven't been very successful recently in bringing out new products or new developments. Whatever, there's always a series of strengths and weaknesses within the organization. So what both of these seem to suggest, the internal and external aspects of the business, is that the business does not, in a sense, operate in isolation. The business must recognize there is an external environment, and it must also ensure that the strengths are maintained and the weaknesses are reduced internally. And when we put both of these together, we get the objectives of the business. So the objectives are the more realistic set of plans, of ambitions that the business will hold. This has been tempered, if you like, by the external environment and by the internal capabilities of the organization. So we've got the objectives of the business derived from, or recognizing, shall we say, the external and the internal environments. And once we've got the objectives, we've got our strategy, where we need to identify a strategy to deliver the objectives. How will the objectives be achieved? And the business needs a strategy to deliver that. Having got the strategy, it needs to be implemented. There's no point in having a strategy if it's not going to be implemented. And once it's implemented, it has to be controlled. The strategy implementation, the procedures undertaken by the business to implement the strategy, those procedures must be controlled. So if it's a reorganization of the plant or a reorganization of the administration or whatever it is, it needs to be controlled, it needs to be monitored, there needs to be feedback and corrective action taken in the event of any gap between what was planned and what was achieved. So we have the feedback mechanism coming from control back to strategy, which updates the strategy. It, in a sense, informs the strategy of what is practical, what is possible, and modifies the strategy and has a new implementation, perhaps a modified implementation, which in itself must be controlled, and monitored and analysed and looked at and fed back. So that's the strategy process that we're considering. Now, the core competency, well, specific production skills and technologies that enable an organization to provide a particular benefit to customers. These would be the core competencies, the specific production skills and technologies. What is it that the business can do that other businesses find difficult? What particular advantage has the business got over its competitors? And if we can classify these, then we are on our way to identifying the core competencies of the business. Of course, core competencies and the study of core competencies, in a sense, has got limitations, or indicates the limitations of over-focusing, if you like, on the core competencies. The limitations, first of all, it may be difficult to identify the core competencies. It may be difficult to identify what is it exactly the business has got that other businesses don't seem to have. Sometimes it's difficult to put your finger exactly on it and say that's the unique benefit the business has got. There may be several aspects of the business that are good, and taken in total they constitute the core competency or core competencies. So maybe identifying one may be difficult. And also, by emphasizing the need on skills, or the need for skills and knowledge and technology, other opportunities may be overlooked. For example, financial investments. So a business may focus in too much on staff skills, or the development of skills, the development of internal knowledge to the business, which gives it an advantage. Looking at specialized technology that's been developed for the particular processes of the business. All of that looks at, if you like, the production side, the side of the business that's orientated towards production and output and throughput of the business, converting the raw materials into output, or converting data into knowledge. Perhaps there are other parts of the business that also have a big contribution to make. For example, financial investments. And perhaps it's good use of spare monies, good use of capital that enables the business to survive and turn in good results. So the other aspects of the business should not be overlooked. Now, when we look at core competencies, we sometimes talk about the hierarchy of capabilities. And we'll have a look at some of these to see what's meant by it. First of all, the current product market profile. The product, the current market, and the strengths and weaknesses within that market should be looked at and understood completely. They should be understood very well. So, what is the product? What is the market? Precisely what is the market? And what are the strengths and weaknesses of the product within the market? Now, this may mean that the product has to be modified or innovated, or that the marketing section needs to do more work on branding or packaging or delivery, or more effectively meeting the customer's requirements. But there certainly is a role for critical market appraisal, looking at the market, looking at the product, and trying to assess what are the strengths and weaknesses of the product within the market. Secondly, we have the identification of sources of competitive advantage. What exactly are the sources of competitive advantage? What gives the business the chance to outmaneuver other businesses in the same market? What is it that the business has got that perhaps other companies haven't got? Or what is it the business could have that the other businesses may not be able to develop? What's the source of the competitive advantage? Is it the workers who make a very high quality product? Is it customer relations management, after sales service? Is it the marketing, the image of the product? What is it exactly that gives the product its competitive advantage? So it needs to be identified. What are the organizational capabilities and competencies? What resources and skills contribute to the competitive advantage? Try to identify exactly what the competitive advantage is. What is it that attracts customers to the product? And what resources and skills contribute to that? Because those are the key resources and the key skills that need to be fostered, that need to be maintained, improved, need to be looked after, need to be managed, perhaps more than the others. Some of the resources of the business may only be used once in a while, or may be underused, or maybe in parts of the business which are not doing very well. But the ones that are linked to a successful product, then those resources must be monitored carefully to ensure that they continue to develop and that the product continues to develop, because that is the core of the business. Evaluate the most important competencies. Well, here we've got extendability. The possibility of extending the competitive advantage to other areas of production or to the development of new products. If a business has got advantages, core competencies, over other businesses, looking at what those skills, those competencies are, those talents are, could they be extended to develop similar products or other products using the same type of skills? Because if the company has a competitive advantage in one area and another product requires similar sets of skills or resources, then perhaps the competitive advantage could be extended. So look to extending the business based on the core competencies, based on the successful core competencies of the business, the ones that gives it competitive advantage. There's also a distinctiveness about this. The degree to which competitive advantage is unique to the business and is clearly identifiable. If the core competencies are strong and if the product is successful in the marketplace, the product is distinctive and it may constitute a brand. And the marketing section, the marketing director and the marketing personnel can position the product in the market so that it meets the aspirations of the management, of the wider management. That means the product is distinct. There's a uniqueness about the product, perhaps. And that uniqueness should be identifiable, should be easily identifiable by customers in the market. And these are the hierarchy of capabilities. Now let's look at a framework for looking at the capabilities of a business. This is the VRIO Framework. It's a framework for evaluating the resources and capabilities of a business. It's one of those anagrams where every letter means something. In this case, it's something that we can't pronounce very easily. Let's start with the first one. The first one is a V for valuable. The ways in which the resource adds value or reduces the cost of production. So a resource is valuable if it adds value. In other words, if there is profit in using that resource, if it's advantageous to use the resource, or if it reduces costs significantly. So is the resource valuable? Secondly, is the resource rare? Identify resources, identify the source of the competitive advantage and see if it's unique to the firm. So identify the source of the competitive advantage. Why is the product doing well in the market? Why exactly is it doing well in the market? What's causing it to do well in the market? In other words, what is the source of the competitive advantage? And is that source unique to the business? If it is, then the business is well positioned. But if other companies can easily copy that resource, perhaps legally copy the resource, then it becomes competitive and the situation changes. So is the resource rare? Is it unique to the business? Is it imitable? If the resource is unique to the business, it must be protected from copying. There are legal ways of doing this, copywriting ideas and having patents, or patents, some people say. Having a patent to protect it legally, protect a process. And that will stop competitors from copying. I don't think anyone has the formula for Coca-Cola. I think it's a secret. But if someone managed to get the formula for Coca-Cola, I think we would not be allowed to produce Coca-Cola and sell it. There is a legal protection on it, which is a protection to the owners of the idea. So intellectual property, as we call it, is the subject of a different session, a different video. But as far as we're concerned here, if a practice or a skill or a talent is imitable, it can be copied. If it can be copied, then it must be protected. It's a secret, and it should be protected by law. And there are ways of doing that through the legal system. Lastly, we've got organizational capacity. The organization must have the capacity to exploit the competitive advantage. If a company has got a competitive advantage, it must be able to exploit it. Otherwise, it's wasted. So the organization must have the capacity, it must have the facility to exploit the opportunity. So we have 4 parts for this framework: valuable, rare, imitable, and capacity. So to fully exploit a resource, particularly if the resource is yielding a competitive advantage, to fully exploit that, we should look at those 4 parts. Now let's look at improving competitive advantage. Well, first of all, we have benchmarking, which is the subject of separate videos. This is a comparison of costs and practices with other similar organizations. It's simply a way of comparing performance in one organization with that of another, to benchmark, to gauge or measure the success or failure of certain processes within an organization as compared to other companies. Leveraging, which in this case we'll say is using to advantage existing resources. So we leverage or use existing resources to gain an advantage. Concentration, targeting resources, for example, making sure that the resources are all being used effectively and aimed in the right direction, aimed towards the achievement of a product which has competitive advantage. So concentrate the resources. Make sure that the resources are all targeting the outcome that's required. And the outcome that's required is the production of a product which has competitive advantage. Conservation. Reduce waste and recycling. So look at resources and cut out the waste. Waste is dead weight, it's a loss. So reduce that. Accumulation. Collect experience and skills and knowledge. Make sure that whatever skills are within the business, make sure that they are understood by a team, so that if one person's away ill, production does not stop. So collect experience and collect the skills and the knowledge. But also leave it with the workers so that they are motivated. They feel involved in the business. They're making a valuable contribution. Their skill is valuable. So on the one hand, collect it to ensure that the business will continue in the event of illness or whatever. On the other hand, make sure that the workers are still motivated and that they feel that they are making a valuable contribution, which they are if the business has got competitive advantage. Complementarity. Look for synergies. Look for connections. This idea of synergy is very important in business. In fact, let's look at a definition of that. Here's one I took from the freedictionary.com, synergies. It says, a synergy is the interaction of two or more agents or forces so that their combined effect is greater than the sum of their individual effects. So sometimes when resources are combined, the output is even better than the combined inputs. That's a synergy. So perhaps two organizations merge. An organization who makes bread and the other organization who sells bread, and they merge, and in so doing they're able to generate perhaps synergies. They're able to bake the bread locally and gain a reputation for high quality product. This sort of thing. So a synergy is when two or more agents join forces and the sum of their efforts is greater than the individual efforts. It's also, number two here, is cooperation or interaction amongst groups, especially among the acquired subsidiaries or merged parts of a corporation, that creates an enhanced combined effect. In other words, getting together, there are the advantages of getting together. So when organizations come together, there is synergy. Now, in the context of what we're talking about here, complementarity, looking at the resources and trying to join the resources together in ways that generate advantages. Just look at the way the machinery, the raw materials, the workers, the layout, the plant. Look at the whole set of resources and see if they can be combined in a way that yield greater output, that they are more efficient. Okay, let's leave synergy and go to the last one here, which is recovery. Capable of easily changing resources into cash if required. That's always a good idea. In case there is a problem with the business, with cash flow in the business, or with payments or receipts from debtors. There's always an issue of perhaps monitoring the cash flow, and there will be times perhaps when cash flow is tight, and is it possible then to change resources into cash if it's required? Now, it's not always the case, but if it's, say, a raw material, then the raw material may be sold back. It may be possible to run down stocks certain times when cash flow is very, very tight, or there is a problem with cash flow. Run down the stocks and in that way put off buying in so as to alleviate the problem on cash flow. But if the resources can be turned into cash, that's an advantage, and we call that recovery. Now let's look at upgrading resources. Upgrade resources. Well, if the competitive advantage is significant and the company can see its advantage in the market, then it should not be complacent about that position. It should look to upgrade the resources, upgrade the capital, engage in further training of staff to further exploit their talents and to enable even more advantages to be reaped in the future. So there should be an ongoing policy of upgrade. Try to complement the existing resources as well by branding. If a product is highly successful in the market, depending on which market it's in, of course, but if it is very successful, then perhaps launch a second product, related product, so that the brand is established. Now there are two products sharing the name, doing different jobs, but in the mind of the customer, these are successful brands. So there may be an opportunity to brand as a consequence of any competitive advantage. Complementary activities, for example car dealerships and maintenance garages. Look to see if there are complementary activities. If a company has got a core competency in a certain area and has got competitive advantage as a consequence, then through the idea of branding and through exploiting that core competency, other activities may be derived. The example I gave here, a successful car dealership may open a garage for maintenance, which is common practice. So that's what we mean by upgrading resources. Now in this session we've looked at core competency, we've looked at the framework for the use of resources, we've talked about competitive advantage, we have talked about how to improve the advantage, and we've looked at various aspects of the issues that are concerned in this. And really that's all we need to do in this session. So I'm going to leave it at that and say thank you for watching.